Welcome to the FiveStack. I want to just say something off the top as someone who came over from Twitter, did a whole bunch of Twitter lives, like hundreds and hundreds of them. Someone that utilized the Twitter algorithm and the YouTube algorithm. It's shit. This is the place to be. People here are so interactive. Hi, Murray. Hi, Sandra. Hi, everybody that's joined. Hi, Peg. Nice to see you. YouTube's useless. YouTube is
Yeah, I agree.
you got to pay for all. It's so stupid. Twitter, I am so grateful to be out of the Twitter hinterland and here on Substack with all of you. Had an incredible conversation in the Dean Blundell show, which is a separate podcast to this. I'm starting up again with a doctor today, Dr. Amber Hall, who moved from the United States to Canada, now practicing in Canada, the relief on her face, the stories that she told about how her shoulders are lower and she's walking around smelling flowers, doesn't have to keep a machete in her room underneath her bed with a handgun in her night table and lock 15 doors and turn on 20 cameras at night. And the only place you can find like-minded people in both countries, which is why, what we do and what I do on my Substack, deanblundell.substack.com, and why Zev does what he does, is because we have like-minded values with democracy-loving Canadians and Americans. And it's incredible because if you didn't have these conversations and these perspectives, these visuals, these videos, these Substack blog posts from people like Dr. Hall, people like you. And by the way, you can go to our Substack anytime and subscribe. You would believe stories like the ones that Donald Trump is trying to tell about Los Angeles, which are total fucking lies and fabrications. You would believe that America's on the precipice of like imminent destruction, like it's a third world country. You would think that the entire city of LA is on fire. You would think that Canada's a despotic, tyrannical regime if you paid attention to the outside news on Twitter, on Instagram, on Snapchat, on all these stupid algorithms that the hard right likes to run into your brains and poison you with. But here on Substack, Hamish and his team have done such an incredible job of making sure inauthenticity doesn't exist. And what you're seeing right now play out in Los Angeles or the United States is inauthentic. It is a work. It is a psyop. It is a brain grab. And I want to remind everybody about that as we have these conversations that we're going to have today. We'll have some fucking fun too, don't worry. But I want everybody to realize that what you're processing is a sim. The reality is that things are nowhere near as bad as the Trump regime wants to paint them and use you to paint those stories. And we'll get to the bottom of some of that today. But love being here at Substack. And, of course, you can go and claim your 35% off deal with Zev over at narrative.org right now for annual subscriptions. You can do the same thing. It's never been more important for all of us to stay together and to have access to each other. You can do the same thing today. One more flash sale this week, 50% off your annual subscription at deanblundell.substack.com. But grateful that you're joining us today, and time to go over the good shit, Zev. We got a busy show for you today.
Yeah, what a great opening. Thank you. And I'm dying to listen to that interview you did with the doctor. I think it's really interesting that so many professionals are moving out of the United States because they can no longer function. And I've just seen it, in the streets of Toronto. The people I meet, a lot of people who worked in the States now living and working in Canada, and not because the pay is any better, not because the opportunities necessarily are any better, but just because the life is so much better, and the government is a government that they can trust. They don't have to have. They don't have to have this Russian-inspired dictator running things, which they have down south. And, which brings us to the number 5 story of the day, because as you point out, it's what happens when you install a Russian-style dictator at the White House. You get Russian-style narratives and Russian-style propaganda and provocation. And this is what we have as the Los Angeles mayor is now thinking about curfews after 400 people were arrested Monday night during immigration protests. 14 for looting, 96 for failure to disperse, plus arrests for assault with a deadly weapon and vandalism. 2 LAPD officers were hospitalized but later released. Bass stressed that the unrest that has happened are a few blocks within the downtown area. It's not all of downtown, as you point out, and it's not all of the city, while arguing that the National Guard isn't stopping violence since their only job is guarding federal buildings. But the curfew thing is, it shows you how this thing snowballs. You've now got the president creating a narrative, sending in the guard, and now there's, more protests, more violence, and now possibly a curfew. And you can see how these things just escalate.
Yeah, escalate because what you're seeing, what you're reading isn't real. Those were peaceful protests. We've gone over that over the past couple of days.
The violence yesterday was violent. I mean, there was
Oh, sure.
looting. There was 100. I don't want to say there's no violence, but there were 100 people were arrested, and 14 of them were for looting. So I consider that violent, and I consider the arrest for assault, and with a deadly weapon, that's violence. So there are some there that I absolutely think, yeah, those are violent things. But the vast majority is peaceful stuff. It's just failing to disperse and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It's not serious rioting. It's not crime, on a
Yeah,
mass
no,
scale.
and you know what? There are. So let's kind of get to the meat of the allegations that Trump makes, the meat of the allegations that Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass are making, and then the actual situation in Los Angeles, inundated over the past couple of days with LA residents, and couldn't be more grateful to have so many
Mhm.
subscribers from Los Angeles. I think 4 or
Great.
5,000 subscribers in the city of Los Angeles alone to our Substacks. And the reports that we're getting from people in LA are, hey, listen, this is confined to a very small area. I walked down Wilshire Boulevard yesterday, got an ice cream with my daughter. We had a great time, and this was when everything was going on. The reports of ICE raids are real. 118 detained yesterday. Yes, some criminals. Yes, some violent. The vast majority of those, there are no records of violence. They were the majority in the neighborhood of 100 to 102 were immigration related. They were like, hey, you're from a different country. We got to get rid of you. So, you're looking at 10 to 20 violent migrants that were apprehended by ICE with ICE crews and, machine guns and fatigues yesterday that also had the National Guard. Stockpiling opportunity. I think that's the best way to describe it. Opportunity for a visual that Donald Trump really, really wanted, which was Los Angeles proper in chaos, as a
Mm.
disaster, as a city on fire, being overrun, which he repeated time and time again in his social media posts, by dangerous, violent, migrant criminals. That did not happen. What happened was, which we pointed out yesterday, is that through the incitement of some of these crowds, the crowds in certain specific pockets became very violent. And, you're dealing with still violent criminals you're trying to apprehend. Some of them are violent. They're going to resort to violence. And LA, I don't know if you're familiar with the words LA riots. It's happened quite a bit over the course of Los Angeles's history. Rodney King was the most notable. I remember when that city was on fire for fucking days and it was lawless. So, what we're looking at here is really a crime that has been committed, but it's a perception crime by the Trump administration, by the
Mhm.
Trump regime. It is tapping in all of Donald Trump's online proxies. The Russian disinformation machine. Elon Musk is now back on Team Trump, retweeting support for the narrative. Donald Trump Jr., same thing. That city's full of, bleeping immigrants and criminals and violent, rapists. And it's time to kill everybody in the city who doesn't look like us effectively. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. But this is not what you think it is. It is small pockets of resistance against heavy-handed oppression by Donald Trump's ICE agents in going way too far to collect people at job sites, at gyms, at Home Depots, and meat packing plants, and 7-Elevens. If you don't look like us, that's okay. We're still going to arrest you anyway. And apparently, some of the vetting of who they're there to get is non-existent. It's, hey, if you see someone that looks like they might be a threat to America, grab them. Those were Stephen Miller's directives in a meeting with ICE agents
Mhm.
and officials a week ago. So
Mhm.
that's what you're seeing, and you're seeing Donald Trump turn this into something it should never have been. And you're also seeing Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass fight for their political lives in what may be Gavin Newsom's attempt to to run for president. So the fallout's incredible on both sides, but at the same time, again, much like, the convoy, much like, everything you see, read, and hear, it is amplified to the point where it is this unsustainable discussion about whether or not Los Angeles is literally on fire. And I can truthfully tell you, as can our subscribers here, that it is not.
It is not on fire. In fact, one of the interesting stories I saw was that they're entrapping some of these workers outside the Home Depot by telling them that they're signing a COVID testing agreement when really they're signing a voluntary deportation agreement. That's how, corrupt the ICE team have been. And the worse than that is this quota system. They've got to get so many people off the streets of America, so many people who are, working, contributing members of the economy, that when you talk about the president perpetuating a crime against the people of America, it's perpetuating a crime of creating and inciting chaos. That's the one crime. But the other one is an economic crime. I mean, what they're going to be doing by removing, if they think they're going to be removing 10 million people off the streets of America, how are they going to let the economy thrive? It's not going to. It's going to shrink down to a very, very small size because we need those people. That's how the economy grows. 10 million people is a lot of people to start taking out of the economy. So it's a double crime. And none of it is about helping the American people with anything. It's all about making him more powerful, making him more of an authoritarian leader, making him more of a dictator. But none of it has got to do with helping the average human being. And that's why it's such a sad state of affairs. The president of the United States is inflicting crime on the American people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what? You can understand that through geography. You can understand that through truth tellers. But the scale and the scope of these protests, let me just kind of give you some context. And I think it's really important to make things very simple when we're trying to dispel bullshit, specifically the Trump regime's bullshit. The geographic extent of this. Now, this is just quick research that we did today for a Substack post coming up to let you know that this is all a work. Los Angeles covers about 469 square miles. Greater LA spans about 2,300 miles. Posts on X consistently reporting that the protests confined to a small area, primarily to a 4 to 5 block radius in downtown, around federal facilities and detention centers. That equates to roughly 0.5 or 1 square mile, or less than 0.2% of the city's total area. Less than 0.2% of the city's total area. Claims of citywide chaos absolutely not supported by any accounts, which emphasize that 90 to 99% of Los Angeles remains unaffected and is functioning normally. And now we've got a curfew, which might actually happen in Los Angeles because of the lies that Donald Trump told. The nature of the unrest, the protests involve, quote, a few thousand demonstrators, some incidents of violence, such as clashes with police, use of stun grenades, property damage, throwing cinder blocks, or damaging park furniture. No reports of widespread arson, looting, or destruction that would describe being the city on fire, or the rhetoric of fire and brimstone appears to be a massive exaggeration that has been perpetuated by people that want to present this as a city on fire or a disaster or a national emergency that would require 700 Marines and 4,000, not 2,000, 4,000 National Guardsmen that Donald Trump is now forcing into the situation. And the reason why those are really important aspects to the story is because you can believe what you see and hear, right? And you can't believe a fucking word that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth at this point. Not one word. And so if you understand the geography, and if you understand the nature of the unrest, and if you also understand the interpretation of these unrests and the purpose of these unrests, it's to declare one thing, and that's called a state of emergency. So Donald Trump can then lean on something called the Insurrection Act, so he can then turn America into a police state ahead of his orgasmic, self-serving military parade on Saturday, which moments ago, breaking news, just said if anybody tries to protest, they're going to get their ass kicked. So there you have it, friends. Quick little summary of what's not happening and the purpose behind why Donald Trump wants everybody to think this is happening.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that Insurrection Act coming up, because that is, in fact, the real goal here is to turn, to basically ignore the Constitution, to tear up your constitutional rights, in every regard. You have none of the judicial rights that you've had up to now. That's where they want to get. So they can basically do whatever they want with complete impunity. The number 4 story is Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson, escalated political rhetoric today by saying that California Governor Gavin Newsom should be tarred and feathered over his handling of LA protests. While Johnson stopped short of endorsing Trump's suggestion that Newsom should be arrested, his call for colonial-era mob punishment against an elected governor represents a stunning departure from democratic norms. This is, it's just language, but this is the language they're using. They're using tarred and feathered. They're using rebellion. They're using insurrection. They're using all this stuff. And, he knows better. Mike Johnson knows better. He's a lawyer. He actually started with that quote by saying, I'm not the guy who can give you a legal opinion about whether Newsom can be arrested. But in fact, he is, because he's a lawyer. He's a constitutional lawyer. But the reality of it is, this is ridiculous that they are now, from this House Speaker, suggesting tarring and feathering a governor.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Johnson's a fucking idiot. MAGA Mike Johnson's a moron. MAGA Mike Johnson's the same MAGA Mike Johnson that shares a "how much porn did you watch today, son" app with his adopted child. This is a guy who shares porn with his adopted child in trying to wean each other off of how much porn they watch in the name of Jesus Christ. Okay, so just let me put that out there before we go a little further. He was asked today, to your point, should Newsom face consequences in any legal way for the trouble that Donald Trump started. Speaker Johnson says, quote, "That's not my lane. I'm not going to give you legal analysis on whether Gavin Newsom should be arrested, but he ought to be tarred and feathered. I'll say that, you say." Old school MAGA Mike with a tarred and feather reference. Listen, I love Gavin Newsom. This is his moment. From the stupidity on the Trump regime side and MAGA Mike Johnson to Gavin Newsom really meeting this moment, calling Trump a stone cold liar, telling Tom Homan and Trump, "Come and get me then, arrest me, fucking get it over with, leave the children alone in my state, tough guy, you want me, come and get me." Karen Bass is meeting the moment. And again, there's to the upside, there's beautiful butterfly effect here when you talk about Donald Trump's stupidity and the Trump regime's fake tough guy act, because that's what this is. It's a fucking fake tough guy act. Is that it elevates any one of their opponents, specifically if those opponents draw really hard fucking lines in the sand like Mark Carney did. And now Mark Carney is experiencing this incredible lift after his election, and leaders of the free world calling him, going, "Hey, what do you want to do next? What do we want to do? We want to get in Trump's craw. What do we got to do?" And Trump is like butt dialing like Mark Carney in the middle of the night, begging for some kind of good news out of Canada, while Canada announces to go it alone. Anybody that stands up to Donald Trump publicly becomes a fucking folk hero. And I have no question in my mind that the job that Gavin Newsom is doing, trying to push back against him and calling these fucking morons out as they should be called out from an official seat that he's in as the governor of California, the economic engine of the United States, it sets up a really incredible battle between good versus evil, between education versus fucking pure stupidity, between legitimate, authentic individuals and fucking con men. And the Trump regime are full of con men. And don't think for a second that this doesn't scare the shit out of MAGA Mike Johnson and Donald Trump and anybody lined up behind Donald Trump, hoping to secede power if and when the old fuck dies. Because I can tell you this, Gavin Newsom is the one guy in the United States of America that scares the shit out of Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
And him meeting that moment right now could mean a presidency run for Gavin Newsom. And if matter of fact, it looks like I'm watching it happen right now.
I mean, it's sure he's the most likely leading candidate, but it's also this is going to be an incredible thing for him because this is the kind of crisis he knows how to handle. It's interesting. Trump said today in one of his appearances that he gave Newsom a call, which by the way, he did not. So Newsom said, "There's no call, not even a voicemail. Americans should be alarmed that a president deploying Marines onto our streets doesn't even know who he's talking to." That's Gavin Newsom. So, that guy could be a president. That guy could be president for sure. And it looks like he's, setting up for that run. But this is happening to him. I mean, it's almost like they're handing him a huge gift because, he knows the city well. He's really respected amongst all Californians, not all of them, but certainly a large number. And this is going to cement his ability to run for the presidency next time around. So, he knows this. He's a very smart politician, but I bet you Donald Trump Jr. is freaking out about that because he thinks he's got the next presidency sewn up, which we'll see.
I don't know if you can be an active, raging cokehead, unabashed cokehead that rubs coke all over his fucking gums in the middle of
Elon Musk
rocket launch. Academy. Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah.
I guess you can. You could be the co-president. Might as well be president, right? Fully known. Back to Canada. This is number 3. Mark Carney has announced Canada's largest military mobilization since World War II, committing to hit NATO's 2% GDP defense spending target immediately, a full decade ahead of schedule. The $18 to $20 billion investment in submarines, Arctic patrol vessels, and cyber defense represents a fundamental shift towards Canadian sovereignty and away from reliance on the United States. According to the White House insiders, the Trump administration is now panicking and threatening tariffs larger than currently planned. How is that even possible? To punish Canada's newfound independence on a military level. This is a lot of bluster, obviously.
It is and it isn't. Do you remember when Canada invented a supersonic fighter jet that surpassed any technology America had ever put in the sky? It was called the Avro Arrow.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember that? Yeah. So back in Diefenbaker's time, he mandated, it was post-war. He's like, we need some jets, guys. And Canada's like, all right, let's build some fucking jets. So we put Canada's best aerospace engineers and scientists and fucking manufacturers to work, much like my friend Flavio Volpe has done with this EV car called the Arrow, which was named after this project, by the way, for its ingenuity and Canadiana. So
but there's a Canadian EV?
Oh, yeah. It's called the Arrow. It's there's a prototype, and there are plans to put it into full production. Oh, yeah.
I just Google that thing up right now. But
the APMA is putting it together, and Flavio, Mr. Canada Volpe, a good buddy of mine.
Oh, get him on the show.
We shall. Yeah, he's an incredible guy.
Oh, that's great. It's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking up the Arrow right now.
So the Avro Arrow was an unrivaled piece of technology that scared the shit out of the United States back in the early 60s. So we unveil this bad boy, and within minutes, the FBI, the CIA, White House administration, Department of Defense, Pentagon officials are in Ottawa at the then Prime Minister's doorstep, Diefenbaker. And they're like, you got to throw that thing in the fucking lake.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you talking about? We just built it, and we're going to go into mass production. They're like, no. We'll protect you, okay? We'll take care of all those things. You're not allowed to have nuclear weapons, and whatever you do, for God's sake, don't upstage us with your technology and build a jet in 2 years that makes us look like fucking morons.
Right.
And Diefenbaker's like, well, we want it. And they're like, you don't have a choice. Do it or you're fucked. So Diefenbaker ordered the scrapping in the middle of the night of the Avro Arrow. I would highly encourage everybody to go and look at this story.
Literally destroyed it in Lake Ontario. I mean, I think that's that kind of was disastrous. These were amazing jets for the time, but also just amazing jets in general. And for Canada to have them at that time was unheard of. So of course the United States was going to get upset about it. But
we're in an Avro Arrow moment.
Yeah.
Zeb. Where Mark Carney's announcement yesterday, as you pointed out, wasn't just to rearm Canadians and go on a little recruitment drive to get more soldiers. It was the complete reimagining, bolstering, paying, reinvesting in building a massive military complex here in Canada, military industrial complex in Canada, as part of the Rearm EU strategy and initiative. And those deals are signed. They're done.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Carney's assessment yesterday saying we need reliable partners when he made that announcement, and then went on tour of a couple of facilities and made some more announcements about how we're going to procure it, how we're going to help build these, manufacture these, get raw materials for these out of the ground, creating an energy superhighway and digital highway across the country. That has been top of mind in the Trump regime for quite some time, because not only does it make America look bad, and not only does it reflect poorly on the dotard president and his sycophants, but the military industrial complex got 75 cents of every military dollar that Canada spent for generations. And not only that, Canada's mistrust sends a message to everybody else that has done any military business with munitions equipment, anything to do with America's military industry, that they've all now started to pivot away from things like deals for F-35s in the
Mhm.
neighborhood of $2 to $3 trillion on the books for the next decade or
Because they have a
two.
kill switch on them.
They all
You
had
know?
kill switches, and we're finding out about these kill
Yeah.
switches on all the equipment.
Mhm.
Same thing with boats, same thing with munitions, same thing with technology. And there's this software that each American piece of equipment uses that is fully in the hands and captured by the American industrial complex and by the Pentagon, which says, hey, we'll sell you our shit, but we've got this software that means we can kill anything so
Mhm.
that you can't use that equipment against us. Donald Trump has even gone so far as to say that, by the way. And now you've got Lockheed Martin and these military, contractors go, no, there's no kill switch. There's no kill switch. And all these military experts are like, yes, dude, there is. You got to admit it. So Donald Trump is now approaching in the regime while they're destroying America, getting rich. They've sort of turned their back on Canada's hopes and dreams, and Canada's going for it. We're just going to do it. And so now the Trump administration is starting to panic, go, whoa, 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 we've got an Avro Arrow moment here, kids. What are we going to do? Like people who actually give a shit. And they're like, well, we're going to look bad. They're going to full steam ahead of us in 5 to 7 years, and they're not going to need us. And all of our military partners are going to lose money, and we're not going to be able to subsidize the build out of our military with other people's military money. What the fuck are we going to do? We don't care. Canada doesn't care. Mark Carney made that painfully clear yesterday. So, as to what's going to happen, hopefully Trump is still busy trying to destroy the United States of America. I hope not. But they're too busy, too tied up in their own greed and their own effort to turn America into a 51st state that I doubt we're going to get that visit from anybody at the Pentagon telling us to, quote, scrap our sovereignty dreams anytime soon.
Well, the world has changed. We're looking at a multipolar world now. So, you've got China and Russia on the one side that are building up these massive armies. And still to now, I mean, Russia's still the huge developer of weapons and producer of weapons and ammunition around the world. China's announcement yesterday that they had breached those international waters, that they are building, as we know, this massive naval fleet. They've got a huge Air Force expansion. Their drone facilities are incredible. Those two countries that represent, the dictatorships, the authoritarians of the world, intend to go to war with the free world. This is not some, this is not just some folly. It's not some exercise that they're doing. They're building up a competition for the free world. If America is too transfixed with their dictator from Russia that they can't see this happening and they keep voting him into power, then someone else has to take that leadership, because someone's got to protect the free world. And so it's not only that Carney doesn't care; he cares so much about democracy and freedom and about the pursuit of the kind of lives that the West has had and the protection of our allies in Europe and the protection of our allies in the South Pacific, that he is investing all this money because we need those defenses, because America may not be there. I mean, the truth of it is, America may stay neutral, it may stay out, it may be on the side of Russia or China. For all we know, the way this president is operating, we don't know where his allegiance lies and where he'll be in the middle of a world war. Chances are, if you look at what he's doing with Ukraine, where they attacked a maternity hospital today, he refused to sell drone defensive weapons to Ukraine, not sell drone defensive weapons to Ukraine, so they could have maybe saved that maternity hospital that the Russians bombed. This is the kind of president that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
No one can trust him. He's completely all crazy. So, Carney's not doing this to screw the United States. Carney's doing this to stand up for the free world, to stand up for democracy, and to stand up for human rights and equality. That's what he's doing it for.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, the impetus for Canada's reimagining their rearmament, reimagining their economy is sevenfold, right? It's not just the Trump regime. It's not just how untrustworthy they are. It's not just their inability to support the decisions they've already made. It's not just how fucking crazy he is and how he's threatened Canada's sovereignty several fucking times. It is what he is doing to our partners and our allies around the world, turning coat, preventing Ukraine from winning their war, preventing Ukraine from defending themselves, preventing Ukraine from defending a fucking maternity hospital, to your point. And to that point, Russia has gone all in Ukraine. They just continue to bomb civilian targets, hospitals, EMS workers when they arrive on the scene with double taps. They're not interested in taking out infrastructure. They're interested in killing Ukrainian people. And Canada watches that. And Canada watches the United States walk away from their responsibility. And Canada goes, holy shit. And then Canada also is watching what is going on in Los Angeles, where the president of the United States is willingly turning troops on his own people. What do you think that means for a country that he thinks isn't a real country that he wants to annex? A country that he doesn't even, it'd be a nice 51st state. It'd be a lot of fun. You don't work as a country. I mean, he's talked about how much he loves California in the past before having a war with California. If he's willing to hurt his own people, put them in jeopardy, use his own people, what do you think he's going to do to Canada? So that's also part of this too.
And as you pointed out earlier, building this narrative in order to do this. So he could build up any narrative lie about Canada and how evil Canada is, whatever. Canada doesn't do what it needs to do, and find a reason, as Putin did in Ukraine, to do exactly the same to Canada, which is why, that threat was so deadly serious when he made it. But we've really got, this is not a president operating on traditional terms. This is not a president who's an authoritarian. He's running like a dictator. He runs America like a dictatorship. And, Putin had a mask-off moment today. I think it was today or yesterday maybe, when he said that this war in Ukraine would not end until NATO was out of the Baltics. Wait a second, dude. Like, that's not what we've been talking about. That's his, much bigger, which we always suspected was what he was going to be after, but he's finally saying it, And so all this bullshit about, it's just about Ukraine and all this kind of stuff, and let's have peace talks, has been just bullshit, theater by Trump and Putin to extend this war. And there was never really an intention to end the war within 48 hours or 4 years. What they really want is NATO out of the Baltics, and that's when this war is going to end. And so that is why Carney is doing what he's doing. That's why the EU is doing what it's doing, and why Trump and America are just completely absconding from their duties. This is when America should be standing up and being a leader, and instead they're just being, they're fighting their own battle against non-existent, imaginary protesters and violent criminals that aren't really there in California. I mean,
and a trans track star, a high school track star, and a trans volleyball player. Yeah.
And he's hallucinating. And he's forgetting to do the job that he was hired to do in the first place, which is defend the American people and the American Constitution. It's just that drives me a little nutty. Why Canadians are they? I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyhow. They seem so nice. Canadians are very nice, actually. They're very, very polite. They'll talk to you about the weather. They seem so accommodating. They've always seemed to play quite a comfortable second fiddle to America. Now, what you were saying with the arrow thing is that because America sort of forced that on Canada? That you better settle down. You can't be too big, too brash to anything for us. And is the real Canada about to emerge?
It certainly looks that way. We used to take our direction. We used to mind our P's and Q's at the behest of the United States. If there's an international incident and Canada was involved, before we did anything, the first call used to be to the White House or the Pentagon. It's like, okay, here's what we're thinking of doing. And then we would talk it over with our sort of babysitters, our military babysitters. And they go, no, do this, or no, do that, or yeah, let's work on something else together. But that was always our first call. There was never any real military sovereignty. We always sort of kind of kept to our own and acted with integrity in both world wars while the U.S. sat out both until they had to get in. So we've always been on the right side of history. But over the past 50, 60 years, we really deferred. And it was really the arrow moment. And I find that, as someone who loves history, Canadian history, I find the arrow moment that Canada is going through to be this incredible opportunity for Canada. Like any chaos that you see, there's a ladder within it. Whether it's the brain drain and Canada reaching out to, I know,
Littlefinger.
There you go.
From the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, there's chaos as a ladder. Absolutely,
I love that.
And and it's from bringing doctors up like Dr. Amber Hall, who I talked to on the podcast. I'd encourage everybody to go watch it. While they're threatening doctors, Canada's sliding programs into the United States, going, "Hey, you want to come here? We'll pay you really well. Hey, you want to go there? We'll pay you really well."
Yeah.
And now with the military issue that we're having, speaking of which, yeah, Canada's military has sucked point blank. 25% of our operating machinery doesn't operate. A lot of our stuff's in disrepair. Our military has been treated poorly because we've allowed that to happen. We have not focused on the military because, we've been able to kind of point to the south of us and go, yeah, but them, right? Yeah, they got stuff. We're not too worried. And that was a relationship that thrived and worked that way for a very long period of time. Canada wasn't allowed to have nukes post Second World War. That was an American directive as well, as was the destruction of the Arrow. So those are conversations that are happening because this is happening. Canada is going to rearm as part of the Rearm Europe and EU Pact. That will start on July the 1st of this year. Canada has sped up our GDP, 2% GDP commitment to NATO from 5 years to this year. It will happen by March of this year. So, we take that very seriously. And these are not moves of a country that's going to capitulate and look to their big brother to the south and go, okay, yeah, we'll do whatever you want. These are rock solid pivots of a country that is not interested in having another Avro Arrow moment with the United States of America.
And let me be clear as well. America's going to need Canada to liberate itself because, what's going on right now is going to end one way or another, but potentially it's going to end by being liberated. And the Canadian forces, the Canadian military expansion that they're doing right now is going to be, I think, very necessary at one point, ultimately to liberate the American people out of this situation that they're in if we get there, if the people don't do it themselves before that.
And let me just kind of add this on to that point.
Yeah.
Some Pentagon officials are absolutely relieved at Canada's moves at the moment. Some Pentagon officials are like, thank God. And I go back to, I think it was 1776, movie where Michael Douglas played Benjamin Franklin. And he was seen as a turncoat by British troops who went over to France. And he's like, hey, guys, just bear with America for a bit. We're going to need your help coming up in like a year. Stayed in France, worked with the government and the then king, going, okay, you could really use your help in America. So what happened? A year or so later, Benjamin Franklin comes back with French troops, and they liberate America in 1776 from British rule, from the rule of a king. And so when we have these conversations about, Pentagon officials secretly in contact with the Canadian military authorities saying, hey, guys, keep it up, keep going. I think that might be part of the impetus. I think that might be part of the conversation is that, smarter minds are prevailing in the United States military, and they're looking at Canada as the new leaders of the free world that, one day might have to liberate them, maybe not through military force, but through policy and action like we're seeing right now from Mark Carney and the government of Canada.
Yeah. I mean, strategically, that's exactly what you would do. I mean, that's the perfect. You would look to your allies to defend you in that situation, of course, and that's what they're doing, and it makes complete sense. So Americans shouldn't feel like this is just a Canadian sort of like big shot moment. It is that, but it's also not just it's not designed to Bigfoot America. It's just designed to be a big shot moment because that's what the moment
that's what
calls.
The opportunity has presented Canada.
Yeah.
Chaos is a ladder, my friend.
Yes.
Chaos is a ladder.
I love that show. That show's such a good show. Oh my gosh! And
I've only watched it once. Game of Thrones. I think I got to watch it again.
I watch it again. I recently rewatched it, and I couldn't believe the parallels for what we're going through right now, because it is thinking about Seven Empires and then the North and there are so many things in that show when you rewatch it that you're like, oh, it's almost like prophetic in some ways of what is happening right now, and it was beautifully done. I mean, it's like you can, watching it again is like watching it for the first time, and it's great to do. So I highly recommend it. Number 2 on the countdown. It's breaking news, actually. Despite his public feud with Elon Musk, Trump has announced he's going to keep Starlink at the White House. Even though cybersecurity experts warn of a security nightmare, Doge operatives, just without any permission, installed the satellite terminals on the roofs of the White House adjacent building, and they left. They did that in February without informing the White House communications team. They created an unmonitored connection that bypassed all security protocols. In other words, if on any device, on your phones, on your computers, if you're in the White House, there was a drop down thing. It said Starlink Wi-Fi. You could just choose that and, uplink anything you wanted onto the Starlink. And from there, where would it go? Who knows? Maybe to Russia. Maybe just to Russia. Elon's father, by the way, Errol Musk, was in Moscow for a couple of days doing
licking ass.
I mean, what was that?
It was like full on. Sorry about my kid. He almost wrecked your plan. Yeah, he went a little too far. I could not stop fucking laughing at Elon Musk's interview with RT propagandists.
Oh,
if you haven't watched it, please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
I mean, basically, it's he says it was a mistake. Obviously, that Elon Musk it was mistaken. He shouldn't have done that. It was, he's stressed out. They're both stressed out. Can you believe these two have been working so closely
out. He's
together?
Working a lot. Did you see? He's working a lot.
Yeah,
he's really stressed. I think he's just like stress tweeting. Couldn't have been the ketamine. Really sorry about that, Russia.
So this guy who doesn't leave South Africa very much is like called in at a last minute to appear at an event which is really Dugin's event. It's like Dugin and Malofiev. It's like the worst of the worst of Kremlin propagandists. And there he is sitting next to Lavrov at this event, telling everyone how great Russia is, how great Putin is. He wants to learn leadership skills from Putin. This is the father of America's Elon Musk, just to make sure America, the guy co-presidenting America right now, Elon Musk. So, what was that all about? It just reveals everything. It was kind of an interesting move for them to do that, but also, boy, did they just like reveal who they were. I mean,
you know what? And Russia loves their C-list celebrities too, right?
Yeah.
And they turn around and pimp them like they're fucking George Clooney.
Yeah.
Or, they'll pimp a cop like he's a law enforcement expert, a guy that left Florida with the Epstein files who ended up getting shoved out a window. It's amazing to me because if you watch that Errol Musk interview and you know anything about Errol Musk, Elon's dad, also married Elon's sister, had 2 babies with Elon's sister. Yes, it's true. So Elon's sister is really his mom, and Elon's brother with his dad that he had with his sister, who's really his mom, is really his uncle. I mean,
it's family values, man. Family values.
You want to talk about cousin fuckers? I mean, this is about as interesting as it gets. And so, when you understand anything about Elon Musk's dad, Errol Musk, how abusive he was to him, he was a fucking raging alcoholic, all the things. The incest is like something else, but whatever.
South Africa, though.
You watch. Well, I don't. Is South Africa a little like Mississippi, Arkansas?
Yeah, it's like a little bit like that. It's a little bit like that in parts, and I'm sure that they came from Afrikaner stock. They came from that part of the world. They came. Oh, yeah. So yeah, they would be that. Look, I don't want to interrupt you because I think you were on a roll.
No, please do. I enjoy the context into Elon's cousin fucking dad.
Errol Musk is a really interesting guy. He was actually on the side of the anti-apartheid movement way back when, as a leader of a student body. And, that's sort of his credentials has been that. But really, as Elon describes him as one of the biggest criminals ever. In one article, he said that he was just an evil man, couldn't stop doing evil. And, over the years, they were supposedly estranged, but are not really that estranged, as it turns out. The thing that connects them most intriguingly to Elon's success is the Emerald Mine, which was in Zambia, which it was sort of funded all of Elon's initial investments, although he'll deny it. And Errol Musk collected a lot of these, had a pipeline of emeralds basically showing up at the house. They have a safe that was left open for the kids. If you want to grab something, go grab some emerald money and just go do whatever it is you want to do as pocket money. That's kind of, but when you really have to understand South Africa back then, like you didn't just stumble onto owning a mine. You had to be involved in something to get that mine. Now, they said they sold a plane or something that they flew to Zambia, but that can't be it. There's probably a much deeper connection between Errol Musk and organized criminality and that whole attempt in the 80s and 90s by the Soviet Union to upset Angola with the Savimbi movement and take over Zambia. And that whole movement is probably when Errol Musk, as a young guy, would have come into contact with the Soviets and probably the KGB. So when you see his trajectory all the way to today, where he's now sitting very comfortably next to Lavrov and Dugin and Malafiev.
Yeah, he was really slouching into that chair like he'd been there before. He was having a great time.
That's not an invitation you just get for like a newcomer. That's a conversation that's an invitation you get for someone.
An old friend.
Yeah, it's an old friend. Comes in next to the foreign minister. And so I was thinking about this. I was writing the story of narrative.org today about why is Errol Musk sitting next to Lavrov? Like, how does that happen? And I started going back to like what was going on at the time, because I was, in South Africa at the time. So I sort of understand the context of where all of this group came from. And I would suspect, it's a suspicion, that there is, a lot of interesting connections between the Soviets in their movement in Southern Africa, yeah, and then Errol Musk, and it's very similar to the sort of authoritarian fear that is being spread right now. It's all the same kind of movement. So
let me ask you a question. Judging you, and you're almost a Musk expert, family expert. You understand because you're from South Africa. You grew up with these knobs. You know the history of them, the history of Afrikaners, apartheid, mining, families like the Thiel family, the Musk family, the Sachs family. So do you think it's feasible to wonder if Elon's turn as what appears to be a Russian puppet started when he was a child through his dad, and maybe the propaganda through his dad, and later in life became co-opted through some of those relationships? Do you think that's a feasible
I think it's
investigation?
Something you could feasibly investigate, and you might be pleasantly surprised by what you come up with, because I grew up at the same time. No one gave me an emerald mine. I didn't have a safe in South Africa that had emeralds flowing out of it that I could use.
Sucks to be you.
It sucks to be me. But Elon Musk, who grew up maybe 100 kilometers away from me, did have an emerald mine and a supply of emeralds, which he then, by the way, took to start off his companies in Canada, and then to zip to it in Canada, and then he used that money to launch Original X, and PayPal was what came out of all that. So he is, one could even argue that along the way, PayPal was probably funded a lot by potentially Soviet money that came in through those mines in South Africa. It's certainly, Peter Thiel came from the same part of the world. Peter Thiel, whose father was involved in mining in Southwest Africa, just neighboring to South Africa. Well, Peter Thiel also, got a lot of money and resources and connections to the Soviets and the Chinese. And one of the key things that PayPal initially did, sorry if I'm digressing here, is that they were able to move money for organized criminals out of China into the West, and probably out of Russia into the West. And that is how that breach into the American economy happened, and how they were able to start, funneling all this dirty laundered money into the West, which is how we got to today. It's not that it's part of the whole trajectory of how we get to today. And one last thing, I'll just leave you with this one because it's
please. Yeah, no, I love this stuff.
If Errol Musk, let's say, I'm guessing, I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe it could be that he was somehow tied to the KGB way back in the 80s. Who's also tied to the KGB way back in the 80s is a guy named Donald Trump, who had his first visit to the Kremlin in 1987. And wouldn't that be interesting? If
do you see that picture of Donald Trump? Fuck, it's fascinating. I love listening to you connect dots because you've been in and around it for 30 years, but or really 50 years. But did you see that video of Trump like taking a whole bunch of shrimp at a Russian buffet, putting it on his plate with a mouthful of shrimp? Like he was just so happy to be at a buffet with free shrimp. Did you see that?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And behind him are like 20 different FSB, KGB agents smiling. It's a fucking great picture. I
haven't seen it. These guys got played. He may think he's achieving whatever he's achieving, but they got so conned by the KGB. They got so consumed by the KGB, and now they're doing all this horrific stuff to America, for the promise of something called crypto, which may or may not materialize. at the end of the day, this is just like a theoretical prize at the end of the rainbow. If they make it nothing, out of it. But
If they didn't win this election, they would have been shut out.
Yeah. So it's an interesting story. This goes back a little bit.
Yeah.
But my point is
thank you. I appreciate it.
My point is that Starlink is back on the on the roof of the White House. The president of the United States does not care that there's possibly a Russian compromised satellite uplink on top of the White House that could take all the information from his office, from every office in the White House, and just siphon it off into the skies and down into the Kremlin's database. No one cares. No one seems to care. It's okay. No problem. Meanwhile, he's concerned about riots in LA.
The number one really riots, by the way.
Yeah, they're not right. The number one story, and this is going back to the original thing that you've already raised, is that Trump is now deploying 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to LA, and he's now openly considering invoking the Insurrection Act against protesters opposing the ICE raids. Trump's escalated from denying an insurrection was occurring to calling protesters violent insurrectionist mobs in less than 48 hours. Legal experts warn that invoking the Insurrection Act could shred state sovereignty and grant unchecked power to militarized responses. Well, we know this, but this is where we're heading. This is reality. It's where we started the show. It's where we're ending the show. The reality is that we are stepping into an Insurrection Act, into a martial law kind of period, which is, unreally tested in this kind of way in America, if this is where we'll end up.
I got some questions for you about this because, we started the show sort of here, and it's a good place to end on Donald Trump's destruction of America and his desire to, this has really been what he's been after this whole time, is getting around the Constitution so that he can turn the United States into a police state. Do you believe this is a dry run? Not just for the United States of America? Do you believe it's to gauge and test America's appetite for this kind of heavy-handed authoritarian pushback against protesters who he's calling insurrectionists? And keep in mind, he also called the January 6th insurrectionists people who were there for a fucking tour. Go and compare both videos of LA and January 6th. You can tell that he's full of shit. But do you think that he's trying to do this ahead of his big dumb military parade this weekend?
I don't think it's going to happen by this weekend. I think he'd love it to happen by this weekend, but I think he's building an authoritarian state, and this is something I've been tracking with Olga, and it's just this thing that happens of a 6-month period is what we're predicting, that there's a tipping point that you can't really turn back from. And we're heading to that tipping point because, and I spoke about this yesterday, but this idea of creating this fear of this other, fear of the undocumented immigrants, fear of LGBTQ, fear of everything, is designed to shore up an authoritarian system. Because once your main base feels so scared that they will let you do anything in order to secure their future. So once you've got the white Americans feeling like, oh my gosh, we're under so much threat from all these people, you can do anything you want, Donald Trump. You can suspend elections. You can suspend democracy. You can be as criminal as you want, and we will let you do that because you're doing it for our survival. This is what he's building. So he doesn't care that there's nothing happening on the streets of LA. He wants the base to think something's happening and that those people are coming for him.
And they're safer if he deploys troops.
They're safe if he does whatever he wants to do. He gets impunity. He can do whatever because it's their livelihood. It's their families. You never would let anyone do that for their families.
So let me ask you another question then. Do you remember the previous month how he was on a pardon tear?
Yeah.
Previous 2 months, pardon 1,600 violent January 6th rioters, insurrectionists.
Yeah.
Some who murdered police officers. Remember that? Gave Ashley Babbitt's family $5 million because she got shot in the head for trying to attack Capitol officers. Wouldn't stop. And
Vice President was threatened with his life. Yeah.
Vice President was got that one. Enrico Tarrio, who worked with the Trump regime to make January 6th a reality, he's out now. There are rumors of a lot of these insurrectionists being paid to either be agitators or paid to be on standby to agitate, to kick some protest ass so that, and this is what I'm asking, is do you think there's any validity to that story? Because kind of makes some of those pardons make sense en masse like we've seen.
Without a doubt, this is what's going on. I mean, you remember that shooting in Milwaukee, or it was Wisconsin, it wasn't Milwaukee, with that young kid, that 17-year-old, 17 who killed a couple of protesters during the uprisings around George Floyd.
Oh yeah,
Um,
what was that little fucker's name? He's just a fat little dick. I can't
I'm so
remember his
bad
name.
remembering names that my brain is
Kyle
too full sometimes.
Rittenhouse.
There you
Kyle
go. Thank you.
Rittenhouse. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle was there. He was a setup. He was an agitator. He was a protester that was sent in to, there was basically co-opted inside the police in order to set him up. And from within there, he was able to do his, his murder of two people. I think it was two people that died there. And so we're going to see the same thing. And this is why everyone's going to be so vigilant, because the attacks are going to come from places that are unpredictable. There are going to be agent provocateurs everywhere in California. And as you point out, there's, so many of them that have just been released. You're going to have some of this happening under the protection of the Marines, under the protection of the National Guard, under the protection of the LAPD. That may seem unthinkable, but that kind of stuff can happen very, very easily. And so we saw the same kind of thing. The agent provocateurs in agent provocateurs, we say it, in Portland.
You don't have to go full French. You don't have to go full French for
I don't know. In Portland, but they're the same thing. They were protecting the federal buildings in Portland when all these guys kept showing up and creating all those things. So you're going to have, without a doubt, people being sent in to inflame this violence, to make it seem far worse, to create events, to incite people's reactions. They're going to try to push the legitimate protesters to the brim, and they're going to be pretending to be protesters as well. Plus, they'll be faking violence and they'll be faking destruction wherever they can. LA is a very wired place, lots of cameras around there, so people are going to be able to see a lot of this stuff. But be very careful of what you believe in the next few days and weeks, because as we've seen in the past, they'll create narratives. They're out there building narratives. They'll be live streaming narratives as they go through it. And these things will be live streamed. That's the other thing that people have to sort of really keep in mind.
Last thing, it's not really a question, just kind of leans into that. Enrico Tarrio last night put out a tweet. This is one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, who's supposed to be in jail for the next 16 years. Trump pardoned him, let him out. Now allegedly working with the Trump regime behind the scenes to foment violence in Los Angeles, among other places. The Proud Boys have chapters around the United States. And by the way, Proud Boys were named a terrorist entity here in Canada several years ago. So that doesn't exist here. And if they do, they go to fucking jail for being terrorists. But to that point, Enrico Tarrio put out a tweet rooting for the National Guard in L.A. I hope they sweep the streets like we did in D.C. in November and December. Better suggestion, save our troops the trouble. Deputize the Proud Boys. Bet it won't happen again. The United States Department of the Proud Boys, with a United States logo and a fucked up face. And I just, just a warning, because we've seen this before. History is a great teacher. They say that you want to learn from the past, you got to talk to the dead, and you do that through books. And if you've ever read anything about Spain and the Franco Wars in Spain in 1936 that led to the rise of a fascist Spain, if you ever read anything about Hitler, you're aware of who Hitler is, or if you know what Vladimir Putin does, where he bombs theaters and buildings and then says, look what they did, and then uses that as a precursor to commit genocide against groups of people in Chechnya. This is that moment. It is, rumors aren't rumors anymore. They're real, where you have the exact same authoritarian playbook, which is empower and enable some of the worst people that support you, violent criminals, people that don't have a conscience, people that know you're a criminal, and so they need your help remaining free as criminals to do criminal things, as your deputies, as your henchmen, as your army, your secret army of green men. I mean, look up Little Green Men, Russia, Ukraine. Look up how the Wagner group started. Exact same way, where they took some of the most hardened, racist, rapists, murderers out of prison, deputized them, turned them into one of the most vicious, fearful, fighting mercenary groups in the history of warfare. And I don't doubt for a second that is what we're seeing. That is the purpose of some of these pardons. We're going to see a test run of some of those pardons and those decisions by the Trump regime this weekend, and he's going to take authoritarianism for a ride. So I appreciate your insight, because I think Americans
It's
need
really
to be aware
smart.
that this weekend they need to be as peaceful as humanly possible.
You're so smart to bring up those names and to say this, because in fact, Enrique Tarrio and Kyle Rittenhouse should be in jail for their entire lives. But because the president has pardoned them, he also done this thing where he said it's okay by pardoning them. He said it's okay to commit violence for him. And this is another key signature of authoritarian leaders, is to say, violence for me is okay. Violence against the other is okay too, but don't do violence by the other. That's not going to be okay. And it's that turnaround of our morality, of our values, of everything that is happening right now. This is the switch from being a democratic country with real values and real democratic ideals into an authoritarian country where only one guy matters. Only him matters, and he can do whatever he wants. And anyone who wants to do that on his behalf, no matter how criminal or disgusting or gross it is, you see this out of Russia all the time, that's okay. It's okay, because they're doing it for dear leader. And this is the mindset switch that is happening in real time in the United States right now. And people have to guard their minds and not let it happen to them, because it is going to be a reality. And I agree with you. I think this is going to be, people have to be so careful this weekend. If people don't protest, it's also okay. You don't have to protest. You could stay at home and do an online social protest and be a monitor of narratives that are disinformation narratives, and just dispel narratives from your home. No one has to feel like they need to go out there, because it is a dangerous situation ultimately. And, I don't want people, people have to think about themselves and about, how they're going to go and their families and all this kind of stuff. It's not an easy decision. On the other hand, those people who want to protest have to be allowed to protest and need to be protected in those protests. And you must be protected in those protests. So I just, my whole thing is just, there's many ways to achieve resistance. It doesn't have to be through the streets alone. There are other ways you could dedicate your time and your energies to resisting this authoritarian structure. And people need to do what matters to them the most.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it. As always, you've done a great job walking us through the 5 most important stories democracy-loving North Americans need to be aware of today. Narrative.org for all of Zev's work, including some of the stuff that he's done. If you go to his Substack, narrative.org, you can have a look at some of the stories we talked about, those deep dives into the Musk family, deep dives into Bitcoin mining and the South African PayPal mafia. You do such a great job. I think you've got 35% off annual subscriptions for the rest of the month as well. So please go and interact. He also does an incredible podcast with the lovely and talented Olga Lautman, who might need a margarita and a vacation at the end of the Trump regime.
She works so hard. She must work as hard as you do. I think both of you guys. I get up in the morning. I see what you put out on the Dean Blundell Substack. I'm like, when did he do this? Yeah. When does he do this? Like, he must wake up at like 4 a.m. in the morning and start working on it. Because by the time I get up, it's all there. You got your day's news, and it's laid out for you, and it's all the biggest stories done in a really smart way, in a really good takes on everything, and you get the real insight into it, which is really important. So deanblundell.substack.com, 50% off. You just said?
Yeah, that's right. Today only. Wow. Today only. We got another flash sale, 50% off annual subscriptions.
Till midnight.
Yeah, like till tonight, tomorrow. I think tomorrow it ends. It's one day. I put it up.
So you guys have 8 hours left to just keep doing it. Keep subscribing to Dean's Substack. It's really worth it. Someone asked me what the difference is between yours and what you did and what I did, and I said that you have all the latest news, but you have it in a really interesting take and in a really good way. And I do sort of more like connecting the dots and what's driving the stories.
Yeah, I think a good way to describe that, and you did a really nice job, is I like to keep people informed and up to date, but I do it in a way that even people like me can understand it. I have to write for me, so I try to make it accessible to everybody else, but also enough of a deep dive into it where you can understand the nuance and what your responsibility is. And we talk about character. We talk about what's important to Americans. It's pro-democracy. And in a way where, policy advisors, experts, whether we're writing about tech or whether disinformation, they'll get a lot out of it, but it's very accessible for other individuals who might not know a lot. And the worst thing you can do when you read is feel stupid. And I feel stupid all the time when I read, specifically everybody else's stuff.
You're the smartest guy I know. So just FYI.
I try to keep it in an accessible manner, but it's pro-democracy. And Zev does a great job, as you said, of connecting dots, deeper dives. and getting people to understand historical comparisons and context so that you can ascertain what people's real intentions are. So, narrative.org, deanblundell.substack, 35% off, 50% off. Let's stay informed and let's stay together and let's keep moving forward for democracy's sake here in Canada and in America. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks for watching the Substack, and want me to end it? You always end it. You want me to end it?
Go for it. You do it.
We'll see you tomorrow, friends.